Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
And what is going on, everyone? It is Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you are tuned in to another edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. I'm the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative Editor-in-Chief. To my right, your left at home, we have a little switch up here because our usual co-host Tom is not here because we are talking wrestling. And if we're talking wrestling, it's on Nerd Initiative. We bring in one man and one man alone to break it down for you. He is the host of the 3FN podcast. He is also the host of Wrestling Night Live every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Nerd Initiative. And he is also the head of any wrestling coverage here at Nerd Initiative. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only Rich.
Yes, I am here. I'm also a comic book reviewer as well for Nerd Initiative. So I get to cross the streams all over the place on this one. So awesome time and great time to be here. And of course, no Tom. So we got to wave to Tom somewhere in the netherworlds.
Yes, we know he's lurking somewhere out here. So definitely give him a shout out. But fear not, we also have our other co-host here on Turn a Page. He is one half of the dynamic duo of Drafts and Dialogue, bringing you that pop culture dialogue you need to know each and every single week. Is the one only Matt from Hops Geeks News. Matt, what's going on?
What's up? As you know, man, you got, rock and roll, you got demons, you got vampires battling demons. I'm immediately sold and really, really glad to get to talk about this one today.
Oh, absolutely, because we have a fantastic book that we need you to run immediately to the comic book shops for, and make sure you get your orders in because the final order cutoff is September 15th for a brand new series coming out from Mass Republic and Massive Publishing. You know they've been making a lot of waves with the Luchaverse, and they have an excellent book that's coming along that's featuring one of the most famous luchadors of all time, Vampiro, with Vampiro Rockabilly Apocalypse. And we are very fortunate enough to have the writer of that book on here. You know his work from Headlock Comics and from books like Tales from the Road, amongst many others. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only Michael Kingston. Michael, what is going on?
How you doing, guys? I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. We're excited to talk about the book because obviously wrestling is one of our passions here, and talking comics and crossing them over. And to bring Vampiro's persona to the pages of the comic shops, I mean, tell us, how did this all come about?
So I've been friends with Kevin for a long time. Mutual respect. We're both hustlers. We work pretty hard, and we've been looking for a project for a long time to be able to sort of jam together on. And this Vampiro idea came up, and he asked me, if I had any thoughts about what I would do, and I gave him, a weird pitch, and he liked it. This is very different than what I usually do. I write Headlocked, and I do Tales from the Road, where I co-create stories with different wrestlers. And this isn't a wrestling comic per se. This is more of a sort of horror action type. I tell people sort of tonally similar to Dusk Till Dawn. But I've been making comics for like 15 years, so and I've been reading comics my whole life. So I basically, every weird idea I've been storing up for all these years that, I couldn't apply to wrestling comics. I managed to jam into Vampiro, and it's been so much fun to make. It's one of my most fun experiences making comics.
I'm glad you said that, because you said Dusk Till Dawn, and that was going to be a later question. Sorry, Rich. Because that second you said Dusk Till Dawn, I was like, yeah, that's the exact vibe I was getting, like, right off the bat. I was thinking like Desperado, Dusk Till Dawn, like, immediately.
Somebody else did, when they had read it, said Preacher meets Cannonball Run.
Oh yeah,
I can see that.
I like that too. Yeah, it's been a ton of fun to make, and the response to the people that have read it has been overwhelmingly positive. And so I just wanted to get out into the world and for people to see it and have fun with it. And, hopefully they like it.
So for wrestling fans, we all who've been watching for a while, and especially people who know anything about Lucha Libre in Mexico, Vampiro is a larger than life star, especially in Mexico. And so with a lot of his character out there, a lot of the things that he's done, was there anything that you kind of drew off of his actual character that you wanted to bring the most attention to while writing the book?
There's two things about Vampiro, right? One is he is incredibly charismatic. He just has this personal charisma to him that when you're around him, right, like you want this dude to like you, like that kind of. He came to my San Diego Comic-Con booth this year in a zoot suit, looking like an assassin for like the mafia or something. I mean, insane. And he pulls it off. You know what I mean? Like there's probably like 6 people in the world that could make that work, but he's just got that sort of charisma to him. And so, when we were trying to come up with an idea for a story, like this was, I mean, he's a rock star. Like even when he, and obviously he did some time with the Misfits and he's played music and stuff. But I mean, just like in every way that you think of the word rock star, he's a rock star. And then the other thing is that he's super weird, and I mean that in like the best way possible. But like every conversation with him is completely unique, and it's not a conversation that you could have with another person. Like he just turns your brain into around and stuff. I mean, he's just a very interesting guy. And so I wanted to bring those aspects of that character to the book. And, and I think that the cool thing too about him being a vampire is we can do this, we can tell stories anywhere with this. We'll tell the Rockabilly apocalypse story, and then we could do something in the past. We could do something in the future. We can do, we can go anywhere with it. And I think that makes it super appealing on top of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like I say, I think fans are going to be in for a real treat with this because, like I say, the order date is by September 15th this week, and the book is going to be dropping in comic shops on October 16th. So you definitely want to make sure you check it out because, like I say, it's a one of a kind vibe. Matt?
It's definitely a one-of-a-kind vibe. As we kind of talked about already, Dusk Till Dawn vibes to it. It has like that horror grindhouse style persona almost to it. Was that always like the original intention, or did it kind of morph into that as you kind of built upon the story?
For me, it was. I just, I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to make it weird and make it fun. And, I've been reading comics my whole life. And like, one of the things that I feel like we lose a little bit sometimes is the fun. Sometimes they're just so overwrought and over dramatic and whatever. And like, I just wanted to be, this is like a midnight horror movie that you would go see, and you'd have your popcorn and you just go to have a good time. And, and I think you can have fun and Pixar's been doing it for years, right? Like they tell fun, simple stories that don't insult people's intelligence. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can tell those kinds of stories without necessarily having them have giant logic gaps or, be stupid or whatever. So, I mean, that's really always what I wanted to do was to tell that kind of a story.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, kind of what you're talking about. There's like, those are my kind of favorite movies too. And it's definitely the one that people are going to want to get. Like you said, Ken said, final order cut off Sunday the 15th. Halloween season's coming, and a lot of people love those kind of B-roll late night Halloween movies. Well, don't forget about the books that you can also read, because this one is right there with those.
Yeah. I mean, it's one that, like I say, I think it's going to gravitate towards a lot of people. And especially when we talk about comics and wrestling. And there's always been a very unique history between the both. And I mean, when you're trying to explain the connection between comics and wrestlings to fans, like what is the approach you go with about that?
Well, it's funny, right? Like, so I've been making comics for 15 years, and for a long time, everybody fought me on it. When I first came up with the idea for Headlocked, I was just a fan, who'd read comics his whole life and felt like wrestling and comics belong together, and that nobody ever made good wrestling comics. Like, you could tell when something is made for love and when something's made for money. Like Deadpool's a perfect example, right? Wolverine Origins Deadpool, made for money, and then obviously, not that they're not making money, but obviously there's a great deal of love in the Ryan Reynolds Deadpools. So, I just always kind of felt like the people who made wrestling comics when I was growing up weren't wrestling fans. And so I wanted to make a comic for wrestling fans, and I pitched it to every publisher, and every publisher said no. I mean, some in the harshest manners possible, like a a representative from a very large publisher literally laughed in my face. And so I made it myself. I sold it out of my backpack at wrestling shows and built a grassroots audience. And then, so I mean, I've been fighting that fight, the wrestling and comics fight, my whole life. I was the first wrestling thing at probably 20 different conventions that had no wrestler rules. We wouldn't allow wrestlers. And I would get Jerry, because Jerry Lawler did the covers to Headlocked, and I would get Jerry in as an artist. They wouldn't take him as a wrestler. And then they'd put us an artist down and we jam the place up. And then they book wrestlers after that. But, it's always been kind of a fight because, I mean, and it's always fun to me, right? Because like everybody I knew that liked wrestling, like comics and vice versa, but like comics are two-dimensional, larger than life, people and colorful costumes in a battle of good and evil. I mean, the only difference with wrestling is it's 3 dimensions, right? And what is it about that 3 dimensions that makes it not worthy enough to be nerdy? So that's always been my battle. I still fight it. I mean, there are people that have very strong opinions against it, but and that was partially why I wanted to make Headlocked when I made Headlocked, which is a story about a theater major who falls in love with wrestling and is learning the wrestling business. So you could sort of examine the craft of wrestling through the eyes of a performance artist. And one of the cool things is I've gotten a ton of people who like comics that didn't like wrestling, who like the pitch to read and understand, like see wrestling through my eyes. So it's tricky, right? It's always been a battle for me. A much harder battle than I thought it would be when I started out.
Well, I mean, that's definitely interesting to hear that it's such a battle, because I feel like wrestling's been one of the most popular, it has its waves. I mean, in the 90s, we look at like the Attitude Era of WWE. It's been massive wrestling. And then it kind of waned a little bit, maybe in the late 2000s. But now we've seen another resurgence. And we've even seen like a resurgence of wrestling stories in comic books, with the Luchaverse, do a power bomb. Those are kind of, do you see wrestling stories kind of finding that nerdy niche that there maybe is going to be something that bigger publishers kind of latch onto? And then also like, where do you see that story going from here?
Which story?
I'm sorry, where do you see is like Vampiro going to kind of lean more into the wrestling aspect? Because I know we've leaned into the rockabilly aspect. Are we going to get more of the wrestling aspect now that it's kind of got its foot in the door?
I think we're going to try to just make it kind of weird and fun. And I think we may do an arc in wrestling, but I think, I think for the most part, I want to do more like weird, occult, fun, grindhouse stuff with this character, just because, it's, I don't know. It's a lot of fun. It's super fun to write, and Vampiro as a character is super fun to write. And he's just got, I mean, when you talk to him about stuff, I mean, he's just got he just believes a bunch of crazy stuff, and he just puts your mind going in a million different directions. And it's like, oh man, all right, let's do this now. And let's do this. And, I mean, I'm already kind of thinking about, where we want to go next.
Well, leaning into like how he's into all the weird stuff, kind of the way you wrote him in this comic without giving too much away, is he's kind of like this, he plays it straight almost. Are you trying to like make him the opposite? Are you going to weave some of that? Because at the same time, he is fighting demons. So it is kind of that weird out there stuff. How much of him did you put into the story?
I mean, I tried to write him with like his swagger, I guess, into the character more than anything else. I think just by the nature of, if you were a vampire who's existed for a while, you know what I mean? Like, you've got to be somewhat at least familiar with weirdness, but he's also a rock star, right? So he's got to have that sort of swag. And so I kind of like him as a straight man, which is why we introduced the character of Everett Holden, who is a music vlogger who kind of gets pulled into the adventure as sort of the, the everyman to kind of, experience the ride as well. So.
Kind of makes me think of the Shia LaBeouf to John Constantine for Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. Good comparison, yeah.
Well, melding the two worlds of wrestling and comics together, because that's what I do all the time. In wrestling, big deals are dream matches. So we'll kind of ask this as a wrestling thing, but it's also more of a comic thing, because if you could book any hero, villain, character, licensing doesn't matter, to take on the comic book version of Vampiro, who would you put him with in a dream match scenario?
Ooh.
It's a lot. Yeah. I know.
That is a lot. I don't know. I think maybe you could probably have a lot of fun with Lobo.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah. I think Lobo might be the move there.
I could definitely see that. Oh yeah.
Definitely, there's a lot, but Lobo was my number one pick when I was thinking of the question. I was like, that would be my number one pick. But then I thought it would also be maybe an interesting to see him against maybe because making the weird stuff, maybe a Spider-Man in some sense.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Just
I
because
mean,
like the battle of the wits, or maybe Deadpool, but I think that's getting a little bit too much on the nose, especially lately.
Yeah.
sure.
No, I
I mean, I
could.
think.
Oh, go. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think just it'd even be fun to do some of the old, some of the old licensed characters like a Tarzan, or, you know what I mean, like
Mhm.
Vampirella. Obviously, would be an interesting team up. But yeah, I think you could do a lot. I think you could do a lot with that character, and I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hopefully maybe down the road, you know what I mean. If we write it, and it's people like it, maybe we do some licensed team ups with somebody or something. I think there's a lot of natural ones out there.
Yeah. I think also if you extend it to media, since we've already said it, from Dusk Till Dawn Vampiro mix up would be on point. Kind of almost have him like the Blade in the situation where it's kind of like the in between hero, if you will. I think that would be epic.
I'd like to, maybe match him up with Rose McGowan's character from the Planet Terror or whatever, with the gun
Oh
on her
yeah,
leg, right?
That'd be good.
Like I think that with him with the guitar and the blades, and her with the gun leg or whatever, I think you could do a lot of cool stuff with that too, especially with the character that she was.
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
Oh, that's
Now we're
such a
just
good
booking him
movie.
everywhere, But book Vampiro versus El Mariachi. Let's go. Just
I
go,
mean, that's
go all in.
I mean, that's totally, that would be so cool.
That
That's
would be a
actually
great costume.
I think
Yeah.
that
No,
might actually be my number one now that you said it.
I was gonna say that'd be a hell of a book to write. Just piecing that together. Oh, as you touched upon, you're a lifelong comic fan. What was the first comic that got you completely won over as a fan?
So interestingly enough, the very first comic book I ever bought is up here on my desk, and it's Spider-Man 187,
Ooh.
which is
Nice.
Captain America and Spider-Man fighting on the cover, which is why I got it. I was very young. But like I'm just familiar with all the characters from there's the Marvel cartoons, and I had an old maid game that had all the Marvel characters on it when Doctor Doom was the old maid, which was my
Mm,
first like encounter with some of like the second tier, because everybody knows Captain America, Thor, whatever, but like Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, Ghost Rider, like that was my introduction to those characters. So I knew all the characters as a kid, and then I was like, oh, why are Captain America and Spider-Man fighting on the cover? I gotta know this. And so that was the first comic book I ever got. And then I would read comics. I'd just get them off the spinner rack at the grocery store, and then my mom took me to my first proper comic shop, and the skies opened up and the birds sang, and I was like, oh, I'm home. And so the Claremont X-Men run is probably the thing that hooked me, and made me a lifelong fan or whatever. And then the thing that made me want to write comics was Concrete. Like I
oh,
think
okay.
Paul Chadwick is probably the most underrated guy in like the history of comics. And I think Concrete is such a great series. Concrete, Think Like a Mountain, like just changed my whole perception of what comics could be. And I don't think I ever would have made any of the books that I had made without reading that.
Yeah.
Concrete's so good too. Yeah, I haven't read that in such a while, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's just like it opens up, like when you pick up a great book, it opens up like the gateway for imagination, and that's something that you see obviously in the pages of Vampiro, Rockabilly, Apocalypse. Is just really kind of saying, okay, what is the wild and craziest thing I can do, and then just put it to page, and it works. And especially like you said, when you're touching upon dealing with wrestlers and when you're writing their personas, like, has there ever been an idea that you've been collaborating with anybody about that it's kind of been like, I don't know if we can go that far, or just like, hey, the sky's the limit. Let's just go, throw it to 10.
I mean, most of the guys I collaborate with are real easy. The initial guys that I collaborated with are, were the guys, the hardcore comic guys like Hurricane, Rob Van Dam, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, whatever. Like those guys were, I mean, they were there, they were in it to have fun and whatever. And then as I've gone along, like, I don't know, I'm pretty good at kind of setting expectations for people, and coming up with, you kind of come with a starting point to kind of get them in the right space. And then, you kind of work on stuff together, and you get in the back and forth. I mean, if anything, the hardest thing, right, is like everybody always wants to look cool. And I don't, so when we do Tales from the Road, we don't do actual people or use licensed names or anything. We make analogs so we can tell the story that we want to tell, and we don't have to worry about upsetting somebody like, oh, well, I would never do that. So, and even then, sometimes it's hard for people to be like, oh, well, why would I do that? I'm like, it's not you, right? So that part of it can be tricky. But for the most part, I mean, everybody's been super, super easy to collaborate with. So much fun, to just sit down. Like, that's the most fulfilling part of doing all of this, is just jamming creatively with people that you respect as creators. People I grew up watching, like, Shane Helms, the Hurricane, was one of my favorite wrestler for a long time because I was the comic book guy, and like he was doing comic book stuff, and that was cool to me. And now he's like one of my best friends. And like, and that came from this because he discovered my comic and he liked it, and then we became friends. And like, so how cool is that, right? Like, I just wanted to make a cool wrestling comic, and now like I'm friends with people I grew up watching on TV, and I've collaborated with some of Hall of Famers and legends and names that everybody knows. And I mean, everything has exceeded my wildest expectations.
That's
I like
awesome.
what you said too, like jamming creatively, because I know this is still a music book. And when you think of jamming, you tend to think of like we used to pick up our guitars, we used to jam together in my friend's garage. But you can still do that, artistically, writing and all that kind of stuff. And it's a lot of the times people don't realize it's even kind of the same process, just sitting there riffing off each other as well, which makes art in any shape or form so special.
The biggest thing that I feel like young creators, the mistake that they make is they don't collaborate enough. Everybody's kind of got their ideas, and obviously usually a book belongs to somebody, and then everybody else is kind of a freelancer on it. But like, I always try to think about when I started working with artists, I ask them what they like to draw and what they don't like to draw and stuff. We do these Norman Rockwell covers for Tales from the Road because Jerry Lawler loves Norman Rockwell. We go to the Norman Rockwell Museum all the time, like, and that's a thing that he's excited to work on. Like, obviously he's likes wrestling because he's done it for 50 years, but it's also his job. So sometimes when you hit people, I feel like when you hit people in their passion, then you're going to get 1,000 times better of a result. So I always try to figure out what people want to do. And, the collaboration part of it is what makes it sing.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, when you hit upon like the collaboration piece, I feel like a lot of people are almost too focused on like this day and age is becoming viral in some shape or form. Whereas if you just sit down and just collaborate, more often than not, that's going to take you a lot further than running your own path in some kind of ways. And speaking of collaboration too, in this book, kind of following the wrestling theme, a lot of the times our wrestlers tend to have, somebody coming along with them, which Vampiro kind of does. She's even a luchador mask. So what went into creating her character in this book? Was it following that wrestling theme of always having that duo, or is it just, hey, he needs kind of like a sidekick, so to speak?
So Estrella, I felt like I felt like it couldn't just be him. There needed to be some people, and if they would make sense, you know what I mean? Like, it would be kind of weird if he was an incredible, guitarist and also some like world-class driver, so I felt like it was good to have a driver, and she's got a whole separate arc of her own that's part of this book. And I mean, ideally at some point I wouldn't mind, sort of spinning her out of it too. Because there's a lot to her as well. Like, she's got, part of her story sort of crashes into this adventure later on. So it's, and I like the idea of just like, I love the old lucha movies where like people are just casually wearing masks in public.
Yes.
Everybody just takes it, for, what it is, right? Here's this guy and he's walking through a McDonald's and he just got he's got a lucha mask on. So, so it's just a fun visual, I think.
Oh, I agree. And she was probably one of my favorite parts of the book as well, just how much went into her. So I'm excited to hear that there might be some spin-offs kind of coming down the road, which kind of leads into my next question is kind of what's next for you and Headlock Comics?
My next book that is coming out is called Friday Night Bigfoot, and it's about a promoter in Portland in 1985 who trains Bigfoot to wrestle to save his family-owned promotion from getting swallowed up by the big incoming sort of national promotion. And we get Bigfoot hooked on coke, so it's we open the story with Bigfoot in rehab. So and that's going to be a lot of fun. So we actually did. So I co-wrote this. I co-created it with Gangrel, and we had done it for Tales from the Road Volume 1. We just did a little 6-page story, and then every time I had seen, we would talk more and more about it. And I was like, we can make this a whole series. So it kind of spun it out of the Headlock universe and sort of made it its own thing, and that'll be an ongoing series. So we're gonna do it. We're gonna start it with single issues through Kickstarter. The first issue is gonna be 32 pages. Got some incredible covers for it. We have an incredible shirt design to go with it, and that's all going to be coming out pretty soon. I think people are really going to like that too. So
if in case anybody didn't know, I have Bigfoot tattooed. He's just holding a Dunkin' Donuts, not a dime bag. I'm sorry, but I am obsessed with Bigfoot, so I will be there day one. Cannot wait to see Bigfoot getting out of rehab and taking on the big promoters.
And then we just did a new Danhausen collaboration for San Diego Comic-Con. We just did a collaboration with Claudio Castagnoli for Pro Wrestle Crate in July. I have Shelton Benjamin and Jordan Grace up next. And then I have 2 other enormous licensed projects that I can't talk about yet. I'll tell you off the air if you want to know, but
yeah.
Okay.
But I have some they're huge names, big names, and they're going to be. I don't know. I'm really, I've been making comics for a long time, and I really kind of want to just take everything I'm doing to the next level. I'll have done probably close to 30 shows this year by the end of the year, conventions. I was just in North Dakota at BakenCon this weekend. That was great. The response to Vampiro up there was insane. Like, I almost sold out. I had these San Diego ash cans, and I had a couple left, and they almost sold right through them. And then Kevin from Mass Republic was in Texas when they were putting on a Lucha show, and he said he sold like 50 copies. So I feel like it's just for us, like the big thing for Vampiro is just getting it in front of people, because I feel like if people know what we have and know what to look forward to, I think it'll do really well.
Oh yeah, and there's it's interesting the markets that kind of go off, like North Dakota. A lot of people may not ever think to go to a Comic-Con there, right? But you, for example, went there and you're like, kind of, no guys, like this is awesome, and it gets your book out there. And I think it's really interesting you named off like a bunch of wrestlers too, who are interested in the comic book space. Is that becoming more of a popular thing amongst like the wrestling community, do you think? Has it always been there, just kind of hidden, or what's the connection there?
I think for a long time, wrestling, particularly when you get into like the 70s and the 80s, you had a lot of athletes, right?
Yeah.
Who couldn't do their job anymore, and then they became wrestlers. And I think now you have a lot of wrestling fans that become wrestlers. And I think that most people that like wrestling like comics. So I think that there's probably an increase in people that are into like geek spaces and stuff like that. We had Shelton at San Diego with us. Huge. I mean, he huge action figure guy, huge comics guy. I mean, he was in his glory, super, super nice guy too. It's a lot of fun. We did a show we did Starcast in Australia together, which is where I got to know him. And just a great dude. And I'm really looking forward to jamming with him creatively. Big video game guy too. So, there's a lot of different directions that we could take it. And then we're working on, we did a story called Fig Story with Matt Cardona and Ryan Myers, which was basically Toy Story with wrestling figures. And we have their Stomp and Paradise personas are basically the A team for action figures. So like if action figures get in trouble, they call these guys and they come in to sort of right the wrongs. And so we did that in Tales from the Road Volume 2. And we're going to be doing some sequels to that and probably try to tie some stuff together with their toy lines and whatnot. So they're also super, super fun to collaborate. Just real creative guys, real excited, just, I don't know. I tend to find the guys who are grinders because I myself am a grinder. And, I think we a lot of the people that I've got to collaborate with me has been out of mutual respect. They see me at shows. They see me set up at wrestling shows. They know what kind of hustle I got. So yeah, and that got me a lot of cred with a lot of people.
Absolutely. I can definitely understand that. As a matter of fact, probably don't remember, but years ago, I used to see you at 2CW shows a lot. So, so there you go. So
I miss 2CW so much.
Yeah. That was such a fun part.
so before its time.
Yeah, it was definitely it was.
I have a
definitely
poster
awesome.
from the last show on this wall right here.
Oh, sweet, man. Yeah, I spent so much time there that I love it. Still, love getting together with people when we can. But it's
There's a
such an
little
awesome experience.
fun story, but they had AJ Styles on their last show, and I was the one that made that happen.
Oh,
Sweet.
wow.
Because they had reached out to AJ, and I think that whoever was booking him at the time said he was going on vacation, and so I called AJ personally and was like, "Hey, you would work for 2CW before they're doing their last show. They really want you there," and so he agreed. I put him in touch with the promoter, and then he agreed to do it. And they actually did a real fun segment with to open the last show, where they came out. 3 of the 2CW guys challenged the AJ and the Bucks to a match, and they came out in their street clothes, and they said they weren't ready to wrestle and whatever, and they'd see them later, and then they left, and then they called them bullet bitches, I believe it was, and then their music hit, and they turned around, they came out, and they were all in their gear, so like they had their street clothes over their gear, and then they went behind the curtain and pulled all their stuff off. That's and awesome. They turned back around and came through.
Dude, I love that so much.
And I always thought that was such a fun little bit. So, and it's funny because I watched that show from backstage, so I was like standing there kind of watching everything kind of go on. But yeah, it was a little fun fact. I got Jerry Lawler to 2CW out of our friendship. So 2CW did a lot for me, and I feel like I did, I try to help them as much as I could too.
Yeah. Shout out to Josh and everybody involved, because it's always a great time and a great company. Speaking of selfishness, though, and not about cocaine Sasquatch, because I'm all in for that as well. I'll be day one in that one. But before I lead into my other question, I got a selfish one. You've done a lot of shows. Are you going to be at New York Comic Con this year?
Yes.
Awesome.
We actually just announced. I don't want to say his name now because I don't need him to show up in my studio, but Joe Hendry will have at our booth on Thursday and Friday. We'll have Mick Foley. We'll have Mick Foley again. I got a couple other people lined up. I believe we'll have Danhausen for a couple days. I believe Vampiro is going to be coming as well. Just trying to get it all put together. I think we'll have Rikishi again too, and working on a couple other guys.
Oh yeah, Rikishi had I did see that he had a book out recently as well, which is pretty cool. Which also, because I saw him at Richmond Comic Con. That's the one I usually hit up since it's right up the road from me, and saw him out there and everything like that, which I thought was pretty rad.
Yeah, I was at Richmond.
Oh, I don't know how I even missed.
I was right next to Nick Nemeth. So we did a little thing with our belts because I have a title belt that Top Rope Belts made for me. That's
so cool.
The king of wrestling comics. It's like they gave it to me, bestowed the title on me, I guess. And I tell little kids I beat up like 12 guys for it. And they're in private. I can't tell adults that because it's sad, but it's fun to tell little kids and make them think I'm a fake tough guy.
Well, unlike Matt at New York Comic Con, me and Ken will stop by and say hi.
Yes, we will.
We've had the only wrestling booth at New York Comic Con for years.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
we've exhibited forever. I mean, it used to be just Jerry and I for a long time, and then I think in 2018 we had Sting and Trish and Lita and Christian. Had Flair there a couple times. We had Diamond Dallas Page, Tommy Dreamer. Trying to think of who else, but we've had a lot of really good guests. Last year we had Mick, we had Rikishi, we had Jake the Snake, Scott Steiner, Buff Bagwell, Powerhouse Hobbs, Brody King. We had we had like 11. The Dudleys we had a heck of a lineup.
Damn, always a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, so definitely check that out. But my actual question, and going to bring it in because obviously I'm doing the wrestling content for Nerd Initiative. I'm going to be greedy. I'm going to be a wrestling question. Right now, being a lifelong fan, are you watching wrestling? And right now, what do you think of the state of pro wrestling? And what are you watching?
I watch as much as I can. I grew up watching WWE. I think I've always been a story guy. I think WWE is doing some real good character work, real good story stuff. AEW, the matches are always great. Sometimes I think they miss some story beats maybe, or get a little whatever. But I mean, you always know that you're going to have a fun time watching the matches. Mm-hmm. So like, there's never an issue with, you're never going to be disappointed. sometimes as a writer, you're like, oh, you should have let that breathe a little bit more, or, like stuff like that sometimes gets on my nerves a little bit, like because presentation means so much, right? Like, I mean, a very recent example was, Jamie Hayter's very popular woman on the roster, and they made her big return on a pre-show in her own country. And like, it's one of those things. It's a positioning thing. And like, it makes a difference, right? Like, I mean, back in the day, right, when Chris Benoit was champion, Triple H was still the focal point of the show. So even though he's got the belt, he's not the guy. So like, and I think that matters to, your positioning on the show matters, how you're treated on the show matters. And that stuff, I don't know, in my brain, I'm always just thinking about that stuff. It drives me crazy sometimes.
It makes sense. I mean, it's from a storytelling standpoint. Yeah. I mean, you got to hook people in somehow, like flashy, the flashy stuff is great, but how are you really hooking them in week to week? So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Everybody needs a reason to stop, right? Like that's the tricky part, right? Like when I was a kid, I was flipping channels, and the first Saturday Night's Main Event came on, and it was George the Animal Steel that made me stop flipping channels. He was, this big dude with hair all over his body and his tongue, and he was going crazy, and I'd never seen anything like that, right? And that's what made me stop. Like, you need a reason to stop. And that's what I always try to tell people. Like, sometimes people reach out to me for advice on their characters and stuff, and I always tell them, I'm like, people got to look at you and immediately know what you're about, right? Like when you see Bray Wyatt, you immediately know what he is, right? Like you see Steve Austin or the Hardys, right? But sometimes if you're just like a jack dude in black boots and black tights, like what is that? And what's the hook, right? Because everybody's in shape. Everybody's a great athlete, especially now, like everybody's, almost everybody on TV is a great wrestler. I mean, and only one guy can probably be the great, like a Bryan Danielson, right? Like there's the one guy who's like the great wrestler, but you know what I mean? Like if you're not the best, then what are you doing, right? Like you got to be the best at your thing, whatever that is.
Well, I've said that forever, and like spending time in the wrestling business, like I did, I still have guys that I talk to who are indie wrestlers, and they'll always ask me the same thing. I know Ken's witnessed my conversation with some guys, and I'm always like, listen, anybody can, and this isn't taking a shot at anybody can do the moves. Everybody does the moves. What sets you apart is who your character is. I mean, the biggest, you argue, you have the best guys wrestling. You have, Bryan Danielson, obviously gold standard, Will Ospreay, gold standard, and a lot of guys, I'm not just forgetting them. I'm not just talking about AEW or WWE, but like, think about merch sales. Think about guys who make you stop the channel. You look at guys like Danhausen, Orange Cassidy, Joe Hendry, which, we were just talking about him a minute ago. You have guys like those that actually make you stop. Now, why? It's because they give you something to see. They give you a gimmick. They give you a personality that you're not used to, or a flashy character. And that's, I think, and I'm agreeing with you, I think that's what a lot is missing from AEW. And then like certain logical points. Like I'm glad you brought up the Jamie Hayter thing. That was actually, I was really kind of upset about that. I remember during the pre-show being like, why would you waste this on a pre-show? Why would you not put that in front of the crowd during the main show?
Right. The other thing I frequently get upset about is extended beatdowns where nobody comes out and saves somebody. Like they tried to murder Bryan Danielson on TV, and they just did this whole pay-per-view about how beloved he was and how much everybody respected him, and nobody came out to save him from getting murdered.
And we were you to making the weakest attempt ever to try to get to him.
Yeah.
Like I can understand, right? Like if you're a bad guy that just turned good, right? Like I can understand why nobody's saving Damian Priest because he was part of the lead heel faction forever. And that kind of makes sense. But like if you're a beloved figure, they left Jon Moxley to die when they did that explosion thing, So I mean, that was way, way back, obviously. But you know what I mean? The whole locker room left him to die.
Except for Eddie Kingston.
Except for Eddie Kingston, for sure. And that's the deal, right? Like, so, like, to me, like, I'm always looking for those logic bits. I mean, I do think that 2 weeks ago, and not to just pick on WWE, but Judgment Day did an extended beatdown on Rhea and Priest. I'm like, Jey Uso's acting like a guy who isn't trying to get laid right now. Why isn't he out to save her, right? Like, he's out here blowing smoke at her, and then, they left her out there to get beat. So, and he was there because he was in the next segment. So, like, that's the sort of thing that I'm always watching. I'm like, like if a beatdown goes too long, so.
I'm also the same way. I'm very critical. But once again, I think like you, I'm more of a story guy. And not saying I don't like the in-ring action, because I love in-ring action. I mean, I have a passion for indie wrestling. I have for a long time.
Mhm.
I right now I'm still watching GCW and Pro Wrestling Revolver, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. And on top of just like the main two, and WWE for a long time, I used to make the joke I just didn't watch because it got to a point where there was nothing. And now, let's be honest, in the last couple years, regime change, and all of a sudden we're actually getting some things. And then you have the NXT to add into that with, Chef Shawn Michaels doing whatever he's doing that makes it just, very, very captivating. And like I said, AEW is on the cusp of it. I think that they have a lot of good things. And like I've always said, order the pay-per-view because they're going to give you the in-ring quality. There's no question about that.
You're never going to have a bad time watching the show. I mean, you might get a little annoyed with story bits, but I mean, the matches are always going to be great.
Amazing. Right.
And that's it. You know what I mean? For a long time, I mean, WWE's, you touched on it, but I mean, they went through some stretches, and that's literally how Headlocked came to be. Like in early 2000, like I was so burnt out, WCW's gone. It's just WWE. You're getting whatever they want. And it wasn't singing to me at all. And then I discovered, I was reading the Observer at the time, and I kept reading about Ring of Honor, and I read about the Joe Punk thing and whatever. And then like, I finally ordered a couple tapes, and like that 100%, like I was just all in on it. And it's, at the time, right? Like those matches weren't anything you could see anywhere else. And it was amazing. And then like I fell in love, like I always tell, I told Joe for years, and it was so cool that when I met him, like he was a fan of my stuff. But like Joe and Punk and Sammy and Kevin were like the guys that like made me look at wrestling a different way. And then because of that, I wanted to write Headlocked. And I think that's natural for the fandom, right? Like the popular stuff pulls you in, right? Like the Hulk Hogan pulls you in or whatever. And then you watch it, and then eventually you sort of, if you stick around, you kind of and develop an appreciation for the thing, right? Like there's a lot of people who say they're wrestling fans, but they're just WWE fans, right? And there's a lot of people who say they're comic book fans, but they're just superhero fans. So like when you become like an actual wrestling fan or an actual comic book fan, like of the art form, I think then you want more, and then you sort of seek out like the craftsman. And I think that's I think that's a journey that a lot of people have that become like hardcore fans of anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the beauty of pro wrestling. It's just like there's so many different styles, and there's so much stuff you can gravitate towards. And like all it just takes is just finding what you kind of just hooks you on at first, and then it just spreads from there. Because I mean, I remember like for me growing up, it was like all WWE, and then all of a sudden it was like, what's this WCW, and then ECW, and then spiraling now into the indies. And like I was fortunate enough to have 2CW and Excite Wrestling here in the 607, and like you start seeing all this, and it makes you just appreciate it that much more as a fan. Then when you see stuff that happens in the ring now, is like you can kind of go like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, and it really accelerates the fandom.
Shout out to Johnny Moose.
Yes.
Yeah, I love Johnny Moose. Like,
yeah, John's an old friend of ours.
Yes. He's overdue to come on. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So he's overdue to come on. I've done a lot of stuff with Johnny in the past, but yeah, it's an interesting world, and like I said, I agree. I think that you said it perfectly. The people who get into the fandom start to branch down into like the smaller streams, and the deeper you go, and then and it doesn't mean that the people who are the fans of just the main things aren't fans. They're just fans of that, and that's perfectly fine.
100%.
And you just keep searching for what it tickles you. You know what I mean? I remember one of the first AAA shows. I think we brought this up when we were talking last time.
To Diego.
To Diego that Ken watched was actual AAA Mania 3 years ago now.
Yeah. And
for some reason they couldn't get licensing in the States to show it on pay-per-view. So they just gave people in the States a code to just watch it on Twitch. And so it was all in Spanish, and neither me or him speak Spanish. And I'm familiar with, Lucha Libre. He wasn't as much, but we had so much fun because like you could still understand what was going on. You still know who the good guy and the bad guy was. You still know who you're supposed to be cheering for, because just watching it, they were telling the story and you could just see it play out. And I think that, if you get to that level, I think you have a lot more fun.
It's one of the things I hate is the tribalism. Like, I mean, wrestling is such a such an amazing art form. And I think, I mean, I've always said that I feel like it's better live, right? Like I think recording it steals a little bit of its soul. I think wrestling should be consumed live in smaller, in smaller closed, tight arenas, 5,000 seats or whatever. I mean, I enjoy the spectacle of WrestleMania, but like it's hard to appreciate the action when you're so far away.
You can't see
watching
anything.
You're watching it on a, and sometimes when you hit the right moment, right? Like I was at WrestleMania this year, and that main event was a thing to experience. But I mean, I always tell people my sort of greatest live experience as a fan was Samoa Joe and Kenta Kobashi in the New Yorker Hotel. And now I was at the Rumble 92. I was at the Screwjob. I've been to probably, I don't know, maybe 12 WrestleManias, whatever. But that was the best experience. Like it was just an incredible thing to see live and experience live. And I don't think it would ever come across the same on DVD.
No, I agree. I was also at WrestleMania this past year as well. So the Cody moment was
Rich is up there freezing his ass off.
That whole match. That was one of the bigger spectacles. And I mean, I was at 35 with Kofi Mania, and that didn't even. It was just so much of a bigger deal with that main event night too.
And you knew, and like the thing was, right? Like everybody knew it was going to happen, and it happened almost exactly how everybody said it was going to happen, and it still catches you, right? Like. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? Like even with knowing, even with the the spoilers or whatever, like it still hits you right in the gut. And when wrestling is done right, like it's my favorite thing is when something happens on a show or whatever, and everybody's just in unison, like, oh, this is awesome, this is great. I mean, you're always going to have some people that are pissy about whatever, but like when the 90% are like, this is great, I love this, whatever, Hangman and Swerve the other night, right? Like burning the house down, incredible go home visual, probably as cool of a go home visual as I've ever seen. And you know what I mean? And everybody was like, oh, that's so cool. You know what I mean? Like, and everybody was about it. And those are my favorite nights on Twitter, when like everybody's just vibing over the same thing.
Absolutely. To your point, to finish up this, the energy at WrestleMania was paramount to the fact I was in attendance for GCW Homecoming when Matt Cardona took on Nick Gage in a death match. And the feeling in that room of 1,000 people was greater than any WrestleMania, even with the Cody moment. That's how awesome that moment was in the room. And especially when Cardona wins, and literally everybody is chucking everything at the ring. And you're just kind of like, wow. But it was kind of funny because people were like, did he fear for his life? I'm like, nobody touched him. Nobody touched Matt. As he walked through the whole crowd. Mm-hmm. Nobody touched him. He knew he wasn't in danger. Everybody was just throwing beers at him. Mm-hmm. But it was really cool to be a part of, just because it was like, wow, and nobody expected it. Although that match was built perfect. The fact that Gage takes a bunch of bumps, and it's about 8 minutes in before finally Cardona goes through the glass. And once he goes through the glass, everybody in the building just loses it, because it's real at that point. You know what I mean? Like everybody was like, is he really going to go through with a death match? And that's why people who got offended at what happened on AEW, I'm like, well, you've never watched a death match. Probably should stay away from death match wrestling.
No, it definitely is. It's an acquired taste, but I mean, that's the great thing about wrestling. It's like, there's so much for everybody. And before
especially
we let
now.
I would say especially nowadays, like, thankfully we have like Triller. We can go watch all the indies now.
IWTV.
Like, there's so much for everybody. It's easy to get hooked on as a fan, much in the same vein as comics. And before we let you get out of here, since you are a big wrestling fan, if you had to put together the ultimate faction of comic characters, who would you put together?
Oof. Dude, you gotta give me some prep time for this, man. Man, I don't even know. I don't even know. Like, I could tell you a wrestling faction I'd put together, because I answered that the other day for somebody. But
okay,
go ahead.
Let's do it.
Somebody was saying like reform like a new NWO, and I said Logan Paul, Dominic Mysterio, Waller, Austin Theory, and Julius Creed. Like just like a young,
especially after the Logan Paul Kevin Nash stuff going on right now.
Oh, I don't even know about that. I'm not even.
Oh,
in the
that's-
thing.
Oh yeah, they're beefing pretty hard right now. Well, I thought that's why you chose to put Logan Paul at the end.
No, no. I mean, Logan's a heat magnet in whatever he does,
Oh,
and
him and
so is
Dominic
and
both,
so is
yeah.
Dominic. And I think Theory and Waller want to be there. They're not at that level, but I think that they would benefit from the association. And I just think at that point you need a heater with that group.
Yeah.
So I think Julius Creed would be the guy.
Especially after seeing him at Bloodsport. So
Yeah.
he definitely could package him as the bruiser.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So before we get out of here, one final plug in case anybody has been watching, and this will be out in podcast form later this week too, or listening, and they are not completely sold on going down to the comic shops, making sure you hit that pre-order for Vampiro, Rockabilly, Apocalypse. What is the final pitch to make sure everybody goes and runs to right down the LCS and go sign up for it?
I mean, aside from the fact that, I'm biased, obviously, I think the story is super, super fun and phenomenal. The coolest thing, and we haven't even talked about it, is the covers. The main cover is by Rafael Galor, who used to paint fantasy covers for Lucha magazines back in the day. And he's an old master, and he hasn't done anything in years. And he's doing, so we have Galor and Pegaso doing covers. And so Galor's doing 1 and 2, and I think Pegaso's doing 3 and 4, and Galor's on 5. And I mean, we've got these like old Lucha masters painting these covers, and they're incredible. Just if nothing else, I mean, honestly, even if you think my story is garbage, like it's worth it for the covers. I mean, I can't wait for people. The cover for number 2 is up on previews now. It's so unbelievably gorgeous. We introduce a motorcycle gang of shotgun-toting nuns called the Bad Habit, and they are hunting Vampiro. And Galor painted the group, and it looks like it come off like a VHS cover box. It's so unbelievably beautifully retro in like the best possible way. And then the cover for number 3 that Pegaso has painted is, I don't know, unbelievable. It's action. There's nuns on motorcycles and Vampiro in the Bonneville with a shotgun, and there's people everywhere. I mean, these guys are doing like a masterclass of cover art. So I think beyond all that, you know what I mean. It's a super fun story. It's a night at the movies, a midnight horror movie with Joe Bob Briggs or whatever. Like it's
fun,
a good
man.
time. Then that's it. And I try to think about that whenever I write stuff. I just want stuff to be fun and interesting and whatever. And I just want people to, have a good time. And I hope you guys have as much fun reading it as I had making it.
I will say this. I can assure you the writing is great in the book too, because I know you said about even if they don't like your writing. I thought that it was people who read the book, phenomenal. It wasn't just as a wrestling fan, because it was more me like loving the horror grindhouse weirdness and embracing all of it.
It's so much weirder.
I mean, you talked about nuns. I mean, the whole, were they more demons? Worse, they're nuns. Right there, I was like, hell yeah. I'm like, I was already in, but now I'm like, I need more of this right away, because it was just like, the way it came off was so like deadpan, but hilarious.
Yeah, like it's a phenomenal book put together. Like I say, it's sharp writing, fantastic art, and it really has just a fun, cool vibe to it. And especially like with everything going on with Mass Republic Comics, as I said, the whole Luchaverse going on right now. Shout out to Diego and Kevin and the whole team over there. Like it's just now such a fun time to get into this and seeing the wrestlers that we see in the ring take it to a whole different level with your creativity and everybody else involved, and just really making just a fun thing to go check out and become a fan about, and really get behind something that I truly think has just got so much crossover appeal. It's going to be one of the next big things we talk about in comics.
That's very nice of you to say. The other thing I probably failed to talk about is Napalm's art on the interiors is fantastic. He's just got a great kinetic style, and it's a very kinetic book, and I think he does a fantastic job. He did if you're looking at it, he did the mock poster that's on the right side of the screen. He did that variant cover, which is one of my favorites too. I love that so much. The one that's all the way to the right. But he's the perfect guy for it. And like I said, man, collaboration makes it sing. And my favorite thing is, right, like I write stuff and I envision it, and then when you see the pages, they're better than you ever possibly could have imagined. And that's when you're on, when you're on all cylinders. And I really feel like as a team, Jacob, Baskel and Letters and whatever, I feel like we're all kind of in lockstep now. And, we've been working on it a lot. And I mean, I'm writing issue 5 right now. So I feel like we're really putting out some good work, and it's definitely worth your time.
I agree. Awesome art, awesome writing. Like I said, in the Luchaverse as a whole, I mean, it's just great stuff across the board. I can't gleam about it enough. I know we got to talk to a few people, but it's just amazing to see the work. And you brought it up earlier, and I know we talked about it before, but it is very much like those old lucha movie style. I know a lot of people in the States might not remember a lot of those, but trust me, it's right up that alley. It's so good.
Yeah, it definitely hits all the marks. And like we say, in the liner notes, comic shop locator is right in there. Links to go pre-order this is right in the notes. You want to make sure you do it. Don't miss out on this book, because trust me, this is going to be one that you want to make sure you add to your collection. Michael, thank you for taking the time out to talk with us. We definitely have to talk to you again after this comes out.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Anytime, I'd be happy. This was a super fun discussion, so I'm always down. Anytime you need me, I'm there.
I was going to say, that's great, because I want to talk about Cocaine Sasquatch after this gets off on Kickstarter. I need send the link so I can make sure I get the day one jump, because listen, that is up my alley.
Same, big time, same.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have to book it around when the launch happens. You'll have to come back on. We'll pencil that in. We'll talk off air about that, but we'll definitely make that happen.
For sure.
All right. And then on behalf of Matt, Rich, and myself, thank you for checking us out here at nerdinitiative.com and on Nerd Initiative on YouTube. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and tap that bell notification to make sure that you want to see more content like this on the programming, because we want to make sure we're letting the bosses know we're doing the right thing here. And we'll end it like we always do on Turn a Page. When you're at the comic shop and you have a great issue in your hands on October 16th, because you pre-ordered Vampiro Rockabilly Apocalypse #1, and you see somebody struggling to find something to pick up, hand yours off to them. Tell them to turn a page. We'll see you next week.
It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. 'Cause anyone who's worth a damn be worth way more than a picture could ever show. You could find the right light, find the right angle, and never find your soul. And it can feel like a losing battle, and this plot is full of holes. This modern way of finding love just makes me feel so alone. And I can't be the only one sick of staring at my phone. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Don't know that I believe in the old time fable. Everyone has just one true love. All I know is you're across this table, and you're all I'm thinking of. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Talk to me. Talk to me. It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know.